Americans for Prosperity is committed to breaking barriers across the country, and Americans for Prosperity is growing across North Dakota. By calling on lawmakers to reduce taxes, spend less, improve health care, and provide second chances, we can empower all North Dakotans to rise. We're fighting for you. Join us today so we can make North Dakota the best state to live, work, and raise a family. Americans for Prosperity paid for this ad. My two guests today are Dr. Shelley Lenz from Killdeer, North Dakota. Is that what we're saying, Shelley? That's where you're from, Killdeer?
Killdeer and Dickinson.
Killdeer,
yep.
Dickinson. All right. That's where you confuse me. You got from two there. But I know you've got businesses, Western North Dakota. You're out there. And then my other guest is a former North Dakota lawmaker, family farmer, Ben Vig. Ben, how are you?
It's going well.
Ben, and
how have you been?
I've been pretty good. Just like everybody else, hunkered down, playing a lot of video games these days. Yeah. Trying to get through things. Shelley and Ben are running for governor and lieutenant governor, respectively, for the North Dakota Democratic Party. They are the presumptive nominees, I guess is the term we should use. We haven't had the June primary ballot yet, but they're running unopposed. So that's where we are. And Ben, you're the latest one on the ticket. I've interviewed Shelley before when she first launched her campaign. You're the latest addition to the ticket. So let's start with you. What made you want to join Dr. Shelley's ticket?
Well, thank you for having me on the show today, Rob. I've followed you on Facebook for, I suppose, 10 or 12 years now, and first time being on the show. So yeah, thank you for calling. One, Dr. Shelley called and invited me, and that meant the world. I thought she brings a new sense of political energy that we haven't seen in a while, and I found that really exciting to have this year. She's willing to have a conversation on the issues that, wow, I just found really refreshing to have that in a political candidate. So, and then for me, it's it's been 10 years since I was in Bismarck, so I think I still know people out there and willing to. We have conversations on how to campaign, but I do segue the conversations over to governing, because I still have still know people in both political parties, both chambers of the legislature. So I hope I can offer a governing guidance when it comes to the campaign and when it comes to transition in November.
It's an interesting thing. The lieutenant governor office is an interesting office, kind of like the vice presidency at the national level, in that typically when somebody decides to run for an elected office, you're running on your own platform of ideas, right? You're running on your resume. I have ideas. I want to do this. But if you're the lieutenant governor, you're kind of signing up to support somebody else's ideas, right? You're kind of signing up to support the person on the top of the ticket. I mean, is that do you view it that way? Is that a fair way to describe it? And what is it about Shelley's ideas that attracted you?
Well, we're going to be doing this as a team. It's not one person over another. It's a team effort, and one is it's the energy. It takes a lot of energy to put your name on the ballot, and it takes commitment to come forward and say, yes, I will be willing to do public service. Ever since high school and college, I've thought public service is a noble profession worth doing. And I think this will be my fourth election. But for Dr. Shelley, to have political energy and willing to talk about the issues, whether it's the markets and what's happening out west with coal and the vibrant communities that we have out there, or what's happening here in the east with excessive water or needing more water. There's just a lot of conversations happening around the state, and when Dr. Shelley called and willing to tackle on some of the issues that we have across the state, I was like, wow, you're willing to do this? Pretty exciting in my book.
Well, do you? You've been out of politics for a while, and I say out of politics. I mean, you last held elected office a decade ago. Any qualms about getting back in? I mean, it's the political. I mean, I've been writing about North Dakota politics. I think this is my 17th year that I'm working on right now, and a lot's changed. Any qualms about jumping back into the fray?
Things have certainly changed. That and this year in the last month or 2 months, when we there's less traveling, people are encouraged to stay home. we're doing more phone calls and more Zoom calls, video calls, and trying to reach each other. So things are going to be changing, no doubt about it. And Chuck Todd on Meet the Press has talked about, in January, he had a comment about the last decade of politics as one of the most difficult years, or one of the most difficult decades in politics. And I certainly hope we can get over what the challenges have been in the past, but we have challenges going forward, and we certainly hope to discuss that next campaign.
Shelley, let's turn back to you. What made you pick Ben Vig? I mean, why Ben? Why did you call him?
Well, I was looking for somebody. My campaign is largely about homegrown prosperity and our economies, our jobs, and our culture. And the nature of North Dakotans, we're very independent, and we take politics pretty serious. Like, we're pretty skeptical. We couldn't have a poser, no posers here. And so what I liked about Ben, and I talked to several people, but when I visited with Ben, one, he is a fifth generation farmer. So, and he's transitioning. His dad is retiring from farming, and he's got a young family, like, he's, 39 or something like that. And actually 36. And little Mara is 3 years old. And so that's the young family farmer that we want to keep here. And he's understanding all the challenges of why they are getting less and less and why it makes it so difficult. So one, he knows the history, he knows the present, and as all farmers do, they're never planning for just a year. They plan for a long time. And his legislative experience is quite serious, if you know what I mean. He's serious when he talks about this stuff. He's been reading.
Well, I know it was always Republicans still talk about John Hoeven when he decided to run for governor, picking Jack Dalrymple, who was a longtime lawmaker, to be his lieutenant governor, and how often he leaned on Dalrymple to guide budgets through the legislative chamber. I mean, there's always friction between the legislative branch and the executive branch. I frankly think that's by design. I think it's a good thing, a healthy thing, normally, most of the time.
Sure.
But there's wisdom in that. I think there is wisdom in picking somebody who has legislative experience. Let's switch gears to what's going on right now. You're campaigning. You and Ben are campaigning for a job that are currently held by Doug Burgum and Brent Sanford. They are doing a part of that job that I think no governor who gets elected, lieutenant governor who gets elected, ever wants to do, which is manage our state through a terrible, terrible emergency. We're all watching Governor Burgum. He's doing daily, nearly daily press briefings and everything else. What do you think of the job he's doing? Would you do anything different?
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. All of us want him to do a good job through this. I mean, that is, nobody wants him to fail. So I would probably take a different approach, but here's the thing, and you can see what I've done for my own, because I can only be the captain of my own ship, which is my vet clinic and my community and my house. So, in my projects abroad. And so I have to protect the people first. And so I guess there's two approaches, and one is like hard vertical containment, or, mitigating the horizontal fallout. And being in living in rural America, we know sometimes horizontal mitigation is difficult because we don't have the resources.
Well, tell me, I'm not sure I'm understanding the vertical versus horizontal thing. What do those terms mean?
Okay. So, for example, like a vertical containment would be, maybe something a little more decisive than a suggestion. For example, our most vulnerable, which would be the nursing homes and our first responders. So instead of a suggestion about the nursing home, let's not have, an outbreak happen in a nursing home. Let's go ahead and put a suggestion, not as a suggestion, but as a decisive action, as a law. Okay, we know they're vulnerable. We're going to go hard there. That's a vertical containment as opposed to a suggestion, which was, okay, let's see what happens. We'll ask people to do something. And if they don't do it, then, we'll see the results soon. And now we'll deal with the horizontal, like, okay, now we're going to do the executive order. And so what gets confusing in my community is when it's a suggestion, and most North Dakotans are very reasonable and they do things, but you make laws not for the good people, but laws for people that may cause harm to the public. And it's causing a little bit of conflict between people that aren't taking those suggestions and people that are, because now you are harming their mother or father in the nursing home. Does that make sense? So it's causing more conflict by offering suggestions instead of actually saying everybody needs to follow this.
Is it a suggestion? Right? Because I read the executive. In fact, you and I had a Twitter exchange, a brief one. I apologize. I actually didn't follow up with you, but we had a Twitter exchange about it, and you called it a suggestion. I read the order. That doesn't read like a suggestion to me.
But before it was a suggestion. He suggested that at the beginning.
Okay.
And this is where days matter. He turned it into an executive order.
Okay, so you're saying he should have issued the executive order faster. Is that what you're saying? Right. Okay.
I don't understand. And again, we all want him to do a good job. And sometimes, as a scientist, we're both working on the edge of knowledge. All of us are right now. And when two scientists reach different results or different conclusions, either you have different information or different assumptions. So I'm not privy to what information and assumptions he's making, and maybe he doesn't know kind of the information that I'm getting here from the community. So that could be our difference, not that one's doing it right and one's doing it wrong. But that's what's causing problems out here.
Do you feel
suggestions instead of orders?
Do you feel like there's a very top level debate we've been having in recent days? Is North Dakota is one of a few states that haven't issued a stay-at-home order or a shelter-in-place order. If you were governor, would you have issued that?
So, what I did in my own clinic is about when was it? Like March 25th. To protect my employees, and I know all the people that they have at home that are sometimes compromised, I sent them home with a shelter-in-place order, and I specifically told them how to quarantine their house, especially if they had a spouse or something that was still going to work, and how to decontaminate them to come in. So that's what I did. I'm also, veterinarians are considered first responders. So I probably would have done a little bit more vertical containment than that horizontal mitigation.
Okay.
And to be clear about it, and I framed it in like, we're going to do this for 8 weeks. Most people just don't like being confused, but these are the directions, and this is how we're going to do it, and then we're going to see what's going to happen in 8 weeks.
I mean, it's
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a very hot debate. So I mean, I guess I'm not sure. Would you? Are you saying you would have issued the order?
I don't know what information Burgum had, but the information that I had, I would have issued it. Yes. And I think I would have also been clear, maybe the whole thing, but I'd protect the most vulnerable, which would be the older people in the nursing homes, sure, and then the first responders, and clearly define who are essential workers. So I think it would have been, let's protect the first responders and the most vulnerable first. And so, for example, let's say there's a household with a 70-year-old in it with a 50-year-old spouse that's still working. Well, I would consider that a vulnerable household, and somehow clearly show that these people should be, not going out into the public. So that's kind of a more vertical containment without a full stay at home for everybody.
Ben, let me ask you this question. You have a background in the legislature. One thing that has frustrated me is I feel like we need some legislative leadership in this moment. And I realize that comes with some obstacles, because in order for the legislature to really act, the legislature has to be together. And the defining characteristic of this pandemic is we're not supposed to be gathering in large groups. So I realize that there's some difficulties to this, but I look at everything. Obviously we have given our governor broad executive powers to handle a situation like this, but recovery from this, economically, in terms of public health, is going to be a long slog. And I feel like there's some things the legislature could begin debating now, perhaps using the legacy fund as to backstop some sort of loan program. That's an idea that I really like, but I'm sure there's a lot of ideas that we could debate. Do you feel like what's frustrated me is I've heard our legislative leaders, specifically House Majority Leader Chet Pollard, and he's saying, we don't need to have a special session now. I just don't agree. I think they should start planning for one now, because we don't know how long this social distancing stuff's going to go on. And I feel like they should come into session because there are some policy questions they could begin answering now. Do you agree with me, or am I just out in left field? Right field, maybe, as the case may be.
Well, the legislature, there's 141 members, and we meet every other year. However, when the legislature is not in session, the authority goes towards the budget section.
Right.
So the budget section just had a meeting. I think that meeting was on a conference call Tuesday morning, and I have not read up on what they discussed there at that time. But so that's how the legislature does work right now. The authority goes to the budget section, which is made up of leadership of both chambers.
We've had some recent. We've recently, earlier in Governor Burgum's administration, we had the state Supreme Court weighing in on just how much can really be delegated to the budget section. There's been some limits put on that as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. That's where the legislature should probably come together in a special session and talk about the budget, talk about authority, talk about what we can do for going forward. When it comes to the governor's office, there should be authority with the emergency commission. There should be roughly, I think it was over $700 million or $750 million in the rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Some estimates are, I think, if that's 12 or 15% of the state budget. So we still have, with the fiscal year ending July 31st, there's still a year and a half left in the fiscal year. So there's still ways to go around it, even though with not having a session. But the correct way of doing it is bring the legislators together and have a conversation of where we go.
Shelley, I honestly look at some of the friction. Governor Burgum's had friction with our legislature, even though they're all Republicans. I mean, it's a Republican-led legislature and a Republican gubernatorial administration. There's been friction. I mean, and some of it's been petty, like Governor Burgum getting kicked off the Senate floor for wearing jeans. Which I thought I too have been yelled at in the legislative chamber. Usually I get in trouble for touching the brass rail. I get, I'm a touch. I don't know why. It's shiny. I have to touch it. But there's been friction there. And I feel like some of the resistance, I think there's some, I don't think the legislature wants any part of this situation right now. I think there's a lot of lawmakers who'd rather just stay at home and attend to they're part-time people. I'm sympathetic to the fact that they have lives and businesses and careers that they want to attend to, and they probably don't want to be in Bismarck right now. So I think there's some reticence there, and I think there's some reticence from Governor Burgum, who frankly sees the legislature a lot of times as a pain in his rear end. What do you take on that situation? Is that, do you think the legislature, it's fine that they're just staying at home right now, or should they engage?
No, absolutely not, especially since we've given emergency powers to the governor. Like, that is when I get the most nervous. That's when we really need balance of power and make sure whatever they're doing is going to turn into results. And so in a crisis, for sure, the legislature should be coming together just to keep everything on track. But then outside of the emergency, I think, one of the reasons, and I don't know if you know this, but I voted for Doug Burgum. But one of the reasons there's no results coming out to my community, and so I don't know why that is, and I don't know if that's because of infighting or just can't get his vision across the line with the legislatures, or is it that he really doesn't have the vision I thought he did? And so I don't know, but I'm starting to figure it out. How about that? Yes. By the way, I think the legislature should be in there. Yeah.
I didn't know that you had voted for Doug Burgum. It's interesting. You've gone from voting for him to 4 years later you want to replace him.
Exactly. And again, it's not that he just lost my vote. It's like I want to do, I think that I can do better for our community. How about that? So, and it's coming from a small businessman versus a kind of CEO perspective, and I'm like more of a service industry and small business versus kind of a big net. Well, it's now, I mean, I guess he sold it to outside the state, but he's more like a CEO instead of like a servant leader, if that makes sense. And that might work better for having a servant leader might work a little bit better for our state, since we're a little bit more community oriented. And I sometimes think like some of the comments, and I hate to say bad things about him during a crisis, but like sometimes he said things that made me think that he doesn't understand middle class economies very well, which is the heart and soul of our towns. So
let me ask you this one. I mean, it's hard to talk about anything else, and hopefully this campaign isn't just going to be about the coronavirus, but I think it's really hard for any of us. It's really hard for any of us to turn our attention away from it right now. I guess my question is, are you with this thing weighing us all down? It's disrupting our lives. I think there's a lot of pessimism out there. I want to be optimistic. I mean, are you? I feel like we got one beautiful thing about humanity is I think we have an endless capacity to overcome, to adapt, to innovate, and to beat these things back. I mean, this is a terrible moment right now in our nation's history. We've had worse moments in the past. It's not the worst moment ever, but it's bad. It's pretty bad out there. But I see reason to be optimistic. I think we can overcome this. And one reason why I think is that independent spirit that you've been talking about. Now, one thing you said earlier, you said that if you were Governor Burgum, you would be issuing more, what were you calling vertical response?
Well, just something decisive instead of suggestions. I don't want suggestions from my governor.
Sure.
Right.
And I
want laws to protect the public.
And it's such a fluid situation, and it's hard to be critical. But one thing, right, because of the independent mindedness that you've talked about with North Dakotans, one thing throughout history with Americans generally, and probably North Dakotans specifically, we don't do well with the government just issuing broad edicts, right? And a lot of times it sees backlash. And I keep thinking of like alcohol prohibition, right? Did it really stop anybody from drinking? Anybody who wanted to drink during Prohibition got a drink, right? And it enriched gangsters. I mean, it backfired colossally. It was our government trying to clamp down on something, and it backfired. I'm worried that if somebody, and I wonder if you share this concern, if somebody is too authoritarian or comes out with orders that are too severe, if people, and again, I say this as somebody who is fully on board, social distance, please do the right thing. But I wonder if people are gonna, and we're seeing it frankly already, if some people just are gonna recoil and say, no, screw you, I'm gonna do what I want.
Well, it's always, human nature is always a balance. So it has to be, effective laws, not just laws. And so, there has to be understanding behind those laws. So like, for example, the seatbelt law that was done a few years ago. There was a lot of resistance, and my mom was one of them. She would not put her seatbelt on, even though that was her little form of resistance. And but it cleared up the hospital beds, and then it became part of our culture. So it's kind of how it's introduced and make sure it's effective. And so alcohol is, and it's always got to be in protection of the public, not to hold power, if that makes sense, or just an idea. It's more like a practical solution to a problem that's causing public harm. So yeah, you can drink alcohol now, but don't get in that car and drive.
Right. Yeah,
right?
and it's
that's the kind of laws that you can,
because it's not a binary choice. Yeah, it's not a binary choice. It's not authoritarianism or anarchy, right? We're constantly that's politics. It's trying to find somewhere in the middle that allows us to do as much as we want to do and lead, free, fulfilling lives, while also recognizing, hey, we have neighbors who may not appreciate, if your liberty is, I want to blast Motley Crue at 3:00 in the morning. Hey, sorry, your neighbors probably aren't on board with that. I'm not saying that that's my personal definition of liberty, but it's somebody's, maybe. I don't know. Ben, let me moving on to maybe away from coronavirus and into broader political considerations. When I talk to a lot of farmers in North Dakota, and a lot of them are voting Republican these days, overwhelmingly. They're voting for Donald Trump. They're voting for Republican legislators. They're voting for Republican candidates on the statewide ballot. But a lot of these folks didn't always do that. A lot of them voted for Ken Conrad and Byron Dorgan, and if they're old enough, voted for Quentin Burdick, back in the day. So I mean, a lot of them voted for Heidi Heitkamp. A lot of them, if you look at Barack Obama's 2008 results in North Dakota, he did pretty well for a Democratic in a state that hasn't elected a Democrat president since LBJ. He did pretty good. And a lot of them say the Democrats under Obama just lost us. I can't support Democrats anymore. I can't even support North Dakota Democrats anymore because they're all the same thing. Now you're a family farmer, longtime Democrat. I'm sure you're hearing a lot of the same things, right? I mean, probably from farmers who used to vote Democrats or voting Republican these days. How do you win those people back?
Well, I think it starts with a conversation. We need to visit about what's happening in the markets right now, and the markets have been falling now for 3 years, and it's as my dad and I and my brother started doing the transition on the family farm. It's things look good in 2015 or so, and 2016, but markets have been falling since then. And last year we had poor quality in the wheat, poor quality in the barley, poor quality. The soybeans came off wet. We just finished the corn 3 weeks ago. And even then with the corn, there's some test weight dockage with that. So to have low markets plus low quality, we got to start having conversation that what to do with markets and what to do with agriculture. I think the state definitely has an opportunity to lead in this when it comes to renewable fuels. If we're going to the USDA projected 10 days ago that we're going to be having 97 million acres of corn and 84 million acres of soybeans, and where are we going to be shipping that if it's not going to be to China right away? So we need to find a way that we can use that domestically by promoting and the production and promoting the consumption of E15 and E30. We can create jobs and reduce emissions here in the U.S. if we do that. And use up our stock on supply. I mean,
that's a little scary to me because I look at demand for ethanol, and a lot of it, frankly, is driven by the government, right? If the government wasn't mandating, the blends essentially, and in fact that's been a bone of contention under the Trump administration. He's been issuing a lot of waivers from those blend requirements, and what we find is that when the government, tamps down on those blend requirements or waives them or what have you, the demand's not there. And so what I'm worried is that we're going to have huge swaths of America's crops. Some of our like corn is our biggest domestic crop by far. Vast swaths of it dedicated to creating a fuel. The demand for which is entirely a government construct. That sounds like a house of cards to me.
Well, it also helps out the oil industry too, because to get the right octane levels in oil and in gas when we fill up our car, to get that, we use oil companies use ethanol.
I don't know if the oil companies
87 octane.
I don't know that the oil companies feel helped though, because they're the ones who want these waivers, and when they're given the waivers, they don't choose to blend ethanol. Well,
the waivers, I think the waivers are given to some of the smaller refineries or some of the smaller producers.
Yeah.
So perhaps the big ones in Houston or the Caribbean may not be getting those waivers, but some of the smaller refineries are. And under the Trump administration, I've kind of started wondering why there's so many. If they could issue one or two, but why are they issuing so many waivers? That I was going to read up on as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. What about the energy? One I think bone of contention maybe between North Dakota's electorate and Democrats, at least nationally, is energy, right? Coal is still in a very important. It still employs a ton of people in North Dakota. I think there's some people who still, if we could cut through some of the ideology, still see a future for coal in North Dakota, still see a future for oil and gas in North Dakota. But we have, nationally that the messaging is, I listened to a debate between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden when Senator Sanders was still in the race. And they were both, we're going to stop fracking. Oil has no future. Coal has no future. That's a big disconnect between North Dakota voters and your party. How do you bridge that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that question
well,
for me
I was
or
just
Ben?
thinking about
Can I just
this.
make a
well, you can both answer it. I'm sorry. Both of you can answer.
I'll just say one thing and then let Ben take over about our homegrown prosperity and ideas. But remember, the Dem-NPL is not the national party. So we have a lot more flexibility to focus on North Dakota issues. And this is one major area where we would disconnect from the national Dem talking point. But go ahead, Ben. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to comment there, too, that my great-grandfather was on the founding board of directors for the Cheyenne Valley Electric Cooperative. And then after that, my grandpa Vig served probably close to 20 years. And so when we were around their dinner table in the 1990s, that so much of the conversation was we would not have electricity on our farm if it wasn't for the power of a co-op. And we would not have electricity if it wasn't for the technology and the work that goes into coal. So this is certainly a valuable industry that we have in North Dakota, and we recognize it every day when we turn the light switch on. So and there's a lot of public investments that go into this. I think just in January or February, the Industrial Commission appropriated $4 million for a study to the coal industry. So we're doing what we can to help them out. And God bless them for that, because there's been certainly a lot of challenges in the last 25 years, and every challenge that we give the industry, they rise to that. We ask for cleaner emissions, and they put scrubbers in. We ask for a little more, and they rise to the challenge. So one of the things that Grandpa always talked about was, if it wasn't the members at the co-op, it is the employees that make it happen. So these are our communities, and this is our state, and we take pride in what we have.
Shelley, let me ask you a little bit about campaigning. Obviously, with coronavirus going on, a lot of the typical tactics that politicians use, and frankly, which I think North Dakotans expect. North Dakotans, I think, still expect to meet the people running for public office. And it's still possible here. So if you're running for governor in North Dakota, there's an expectation that you show up in county parades. And there's an expectation that you show up at the local VFW and shake hands. We want to, even if it's just a passing meeting, North Dakota voters expect to see our elected leaders. That I don't know how possible that's going to be this cycle. You're also running against Doug Burgum, who he's a Republican incumbent. He's going to raise a lot of money. He's also independently wealthy, and in 2016 showed he's not shy about spending money on his race. Now, money isn't everything in politics. If it was, Heidi Heitkamp would have won in 2018. I think she spent 3 times what Kevin Cramer spent on her campaign, and she lost decisively. So it's not everything, but it's a lot of things, particularly for someone who I think is, at this point, you're just starting to introduce yourself to a statewide audience. Give us, what are some of your strategies? How are you going to work this campaign and seek victory?
Well, yeah, so obviously we're not going to be able to compete on money. We're not going to be, but really have to earn the vote, and to earn anybody, especially a North Dakotan's vote of confidence, is they have to meet you. They have to size you up. They have to listen to your ideas. And if you're really truly going to represent them. So that was our strategy from the get-go, especially going to the smaller towns, which is a lot of times people forget that the small towns are a large part of our culture. And so with the corona, luckily, one thing that North Dakota is really advanced in is the broadband, is to set up, and I really think it's important to see their faces and so you can look in their eye. That's just human nature. That's how you judge somebody, not just what they say, but what their face looks like when they're saying it. And so we're going to be doing some unique things. So we're going to be starting these gatherings, these virtual gatherings for different groups, depending on What it could be a statewide gathering or like individual communities, whether it's like a specific ag questions or specific energy questions or just the coffee clutches that happen, or like my little town in Dodge that I've been going to, they meet every Friday in the morning and we sit around and talk about issues there, but doing that in a virtual way. So we're setting that network up. The other would be, I have to ask my neighbor, let's say I want an older person that might be in the rest home or in the nursing home I want to hear what they have to say and what they think, and maybe they want to know them. Then I'm going to have to ask their neighbor to talk to them through, setting up a Zoom account so they can I can meet with them. So I think it's going to cause more connection, but I already have that connection, if that makes sense, for the last 20 years, at least out here.
Sure.
But that translates to every town.
Sure.
Because there's certain issues that are very common. So we earned the vote, good old fashioned way.
Well, for the listeners, we lost part of your answer there. I apologize for that because we're all leading. Who knows what it is? We're all leaning on technology right now. Everybody and their mother is doing video conferencing, and we're doing this over Skype right now. So we had a little bit of a glitch there, but I think we got most of it. It's certainly going to be a challenge, and I want to continue talking to both of you as the election cycle rolls on, because I think it's an important debate to have, and I'm always I always want to talk to everybody and get all the insights in and all the views in. Shelley, thanks for your time. Ben, thanks for your time as well. And thanks for when you got on. You said you've been following me all these years. Thanks for reading. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well,
thank you, Rob.
This has been an enjoyable conversation, so thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank both of you.